don't forget about your sales partners. That's where all the money is going to come in. And if you forget about that relationship and kind of what the pricing model how it has to work for them, you're going to run into trouble.
Yo, mic check. What's up, everybody? You're listening to the Street Pricing Podcast, the only show where proven SaaS leaders share their mindset and mistakes in pricing so we can all stop guessing and start growing. Enjoy, subscribe, and tell a friend. Now, let's break it down with your host and sought-after slayer of bad pricing, Marcos Rivera.
What's up and welcome to the Street Pricing Podcast. I'm Marcos Rivera, author, founder, and CEO of Pricing.io. And today's guest is a fellow pricing buff. Like, we love to talk about pricing inside and out. I have David Caughman with me. He runs pricing at Docker. David, welcome to the show, man.
Marcos, thanks for having me. Love talking pricing. So you nailed it, pricing buff.
I mean, we're going to have a lot of fun chatting about this today because I don't get to talk to too many buffs, people who read it, get into it, and solve pricing problems like I do. So we're going to jump in. But before we do, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about you and what you do?
I mean, as you mentioned, I'm a pricing buff. I've been in the pricing world my entire post-MBA career. So I'm coming up on 11, 12 years of being in pricing in various forms or fashions. So initially, I was running dynamic pricing models for airlines and hotels and things like that. And then I left. I did that for a couple of years and then left and joined a company called Simon-Kucher and Partners. They also do pricing. They're the world's largest pricing consultancy. But yeah, that's where I spent most of my foundational years, I'd say. I was at Simon-Kucher for 4 years. I focused on B2B SaaS, pricing and monetization. So I learned the whole Simon-Kucher playbook around pricing and packaging for B2B SaaS companies. I never really had it in my sights to be a partner at a consulting company. Just didn't like the lifestyle. And I got a great offer to jump ship from Simon-Kucher, travel across the country. I was in New York. I got an offer from Stripe to go be the second hire on their monetization team back in 2019. So not quite like early days Stripe, but like early mid days. And yeah, so that was a blast. I got a lot of great experience there. Worked with a lot of smart people. Did a lot of really cool things. At the end end of everything, like 2 years was plenty. I felt like I accomplished a lot, and this was now kind of in the pandemic, and I decided to start my own consulting business. I figured that with Simon-Kucher Partners, you're going to spend 6-7 figure consulting budgets to get really world-class pricing advice. But I mean, there's a market for much cheaper but still high quality pricing advice for companies that maybe aren't quite as well funded or much smaller in their growth stages. And so that was the value proposition behind Axia Consulting. And so that's the company I started in 2021, and I still dabble with that, even though I am leading pricing at Docker. But I did that full time. I did that exclusively for 2 years. All referral business, no marketing of any kind. I've got a great network of people from Simon-Kucher and also Stripe and other places that were referring me business. And then Docker came knocking, and it was another great opportunity. Docker's a great brand name. It's known very well in the software development community, and it offered some really unique challenges for someone like me in pricing. It's an open source native company, and so it comes, with that comes a whole host of really interesting and unique challenges for someone who's in my world. And really monetization was like maybe one of the biggest things holding them back from really, commercial success. And so that just seemed like a great opportunity. I jumped at it. I've been there for a little over 2 years now. And yeah, now here I am.
And here you are, man, with the pedigree. I mean, Simon-Kucher, Stripe, Docker, a lot of great places to learn. And plus just also in other pricing contexts you've been dabbling in. So this is going to be a big treat because you've done as much pricing and digging in and seen a lot of different things as I have. And so we're going to be able to talk a lot of good stuff today, man. Are you ready to get street?
I'm ready.
Awesome. Cool, man. Cool. So let me give a quick roadmap for the audience here. So this show is based on the book Street Pricing. So what we're going to do is lay it out in the same way. We're first going to start with Rewind, which is a story about a struggle, a success in pricing. And you have plenty of them. So can't wait to see which one you pick and talk about today. And then we're going to move on to Play, which is what's working today. Maybe we could talk about what are some of the cool things you've done at Docker, things that you seem to resonate and and help with monetization. And then we're going to move into fast forward. So where is pricing going? And this is really going to be fun because for somebody who's seen so many different models out there, there's probably some trends you're picking up on. Maybe we can get into all this fun AI stuff that's going on too, right? So we'll talk about the future, and that's going to be the show, man. So with all that, if that sounds good, why don't you open things up, David, with a story?
So this is like kind of a lesson learned kind of a story here, right? Is that, okay, that's the idea. So many to choose from, to be honest. I mean, there's one recently that stands out. So Docker, if people are familiar, Docker has one great application that's the gold standard used by millions of software developers every day at companies. And so, one of Docker's, besides monetization, like one of the things that they have to really do to grow revenue is going to be to attach new products and new ARR to this like really game-changing application that everybody uses. And so our first effort at coming up with what we called our first second product was kind of a failure. And I think there were some things, there was a lot of lesson to be shared from everybody that was involved, but I think there's definitely some pricing lessons that were involved too. One thing, so I'll set some more context. It was a security sort of software security scanning tool, and we wanted to have both a product, a PLG and an SLG motion for this new product. We wanted it to be able to be adopted bottoms up by software developers and their teams, but also top down by larger VP of engineering, procurement, and so on and so forth. And myself being embedded in the product org, and with a lot of, I don't want to say pricing theory, but like at Simon-Kucher, like you do a lot of pricing strategy, and a lot of the things you learn are very tied to product strategy and how the product works, what the use cases are, what are the inputs of the product, what are the outputs. And so you're very into the nitty gritty of the product design, how it works, who's using it. And also just sitting inside the product org like I was at the time, that was kind of the way that I was looking at the product. Of course, we also had a sales-led motion. And so I think one thing that I could have done a better job is really understanding. Docker sells very complex products. Even for me, I honestly don't really understand exactly what the products do a lot of the times. And so not having that really strong partnership with go-to-market teams and sales. I think if I had been able to really involve them in the same way that I involve product managers, product marketing managers, product designers, really would have gone a long way in helping ensure that we could sell this thing, that it was easy for sales to sell. As a second product, sales' primary focus was selling our main killer product, and so it wasn't always as high of a priority for them to sell a smaller, like newer product. And so really making sure that the pricing model was super simple and could be easily pitched by sales was something that I think we kind of missed on. And it's no longer, we kind of scrapped it recently, and we kind of just included it now within the broader suite of products. It's no longer a standalone product that we try to sell. So, yeah, I think that's a good lesson learned out there for people, especially if you're sitting in product. Like, don't forget about your sales partners. That's where all the money is going to come in. And if you forget about that relationship and kind of what the pricing model how it has to work for them, you're going to run into trouble.
Oh yeah, big trouble, because I look at them as almost the number one stakeholder of the pricing model, right? Especially in the sales-led motion, they need to be able to use it, frame it, position it, close on it, and things like that. So this is interesting to me because I also came from the world of product, right? And so it sounds like in this scenario with this security scanning tool that you were able to build it out, right? And maybe there were some use cases you thought that folks were really having a big pain that they wanted to solve and pay for in addition to that. And the way they pay is actually really important, especially in this context, right? When you got complicated products and buyers who don't want to spend a lot of money, they could probably solve solve for their problems in a different way, right? So let me ask you this, right? So as you were working with the team, there's something that I used to read back in my product days. Marty Kagan's has a couple good books, and Marty talks about these four risks, right? And one of those four risks is value risk, right? Is the value going to resonate with that group, right? And
Right.
so the big question is, not all value is worth paying for,
Right.
which is a weird thing to think about, right? You think, oh, value is something that everyone should be willing to pay for, but it's all set within the context, right? Is it really that much more solving the problem that is worth to dish out more money? And if you're trying to raise attach rates and trying to raise attach rates ARR, oftentimes you're trying to extend from use cases you're already solving pretty damn well, but enough to get them to spend more and change more. This is the piece that people forget, right? Is that humans will create muscle memory around any product, okay? And so for them to change and expand beyond that muscle memory, it's got to be worth it for them. And then to pull out and shell out some more money, it's got to be worth it, right? So let me ask a question. If you were to go back in time and see like, all right, if we were to look at this thing differently and get sales a little bit more aligned and how to sell, maybe what are one or two steps you would have done with sales to get them in?
Getting them leadership more involved at every step throughout the process. I think the approach within the product org was, hey, they don't necessarily need to know how the sausage is made, sales. They want to know what to do, how to do it, and then to go do it. With complex products and complex pricing models, it's worth considering really trying to bring people along in the process as you develop the pricing model, as you talk to customers and you learn how they're using the product. Because these are also things that are important to sales when they sell. A lot of the same questions that I'm trying to answer around use cases and customer persona and segmentation that inform pricing are very much things that sales is going to want to know and is going to help them sell the new product as well. And so I think really just getting them involved in some of the more of the sausage making and at an earlier stage would have really helped.
Yeah, I think early in the understanding of how it's coming along, and maybe even giving them the sensation of input and getting their feedback along the way. Oftentimes, I found that opens things up, right?
Yeah, they want to be listened to. Everybody wants to be listened to. It's not, and really, having that feedback line open and being able to take that feedback early on is key.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They definitely wanted to get there to weigh in. Most of the time when sales sees a price change coming, they get a little guarded, right? I mean, I don't know if you've seen this in all the other ones at projects that you've been on, but they start to get guarded, like, hey, are you trying to make it harder for me to hit quota? Because that's the number one way to lose sales on your side, or to lose their buy-in, is to make it feel like you're losing quota. So one thing I always look at is, how is this going to change their commission structure, or how is it going to make them help them close the deals with maybe fewer calls, fewer steps, maybe help them, angle and maneuver. You always got to give sales a way to go. And this is one of the biggest things I learned in my career. They got to be able to close. And if they feel like the new model gives them more ways to close than the old model, oftentimes they'll jump on board.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You nailed it. Yeah.
Let me ask you this. If in a scenario where you did it right, where you felt like, man, I should have done it that way, or I really did a good job in connecting go-to-market and sales, what does that look like? What did you do differently in that scenario where sales was fully bought in?
You can never over-communicate with sales. I mean, sales are so busy, and things are constantly changing with the product and how it's marketed, and they have to be on top of all of that stuff to do their job well. And so, I mean, in any given week, there's dozens of internal FAQs or memos or whatever that's getting thrown at that org, and they do the best to stay on top of things. But I mean, to be realistic, maybe 10% of that stuff is going to hit, or 10% of it's really going to resonate at that point in time. But if you keep just hammering it over and over and over and communicating things over and over and over, and really don't be afraid to over. And that's been crucial. I mean, we've set up Slack channels. So Docker just changed our entire pricing and product strategy last week. So very proud about that. And having all kinds of Slack channels set up to where sales can come in and ask any sort of question, and someone's going to give them an answer within within a few hours. Just things like that really make or break, can make or break the change.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge, by the way. A dedicated Slack channel to answer questions. And I knew a company who did that. They created a channel, and then they went a step further and even created it was like a weekly office hours or something like that, where they just rolled out the pricing and they wanted to make sure that sales, like we got your back, like we got all your support and questions and answers. So that they did is they created a Slack just for questions on pricing and to capture anything they're seeing on how the customer is reacting to this new model and things like that. And then from there, they created an office hours where it's like, all right, come on in. Let's talk about, sometimes it was honestly just like a deal specific question, but it was just also like, hey, I'm kind of confused about this package, or is this thing included? Just really giving them a hand goes a long way.
I like that two-way communication too, because, sales, they get the voice of the customer. And so there's feedback that we would love to get from them. And so like having that, that office hours or whatever set up so they can come back and tell us like what they're hearing about the change. I mean, that's huge. That's great.
Yeah, you can't lose sight of that. They need to stay on your side, not just as you're building, as you were saying, which was a really good point, but when you launch and when it's getting out there, and then all these stories are going to start coming in, right? The horror stories or stories of victory, who's to say, right? But they're all going to come in, and you have to sort of find ways to fight through that noise to see what's really going on, right? And so those two things I think are super helpful. I think that's a big valuable lesson for everybody listening here who may think that, hey, sales just needs to grab whatever pricing model you give them and let them run. I think pulling them in, like you said earlier, and then creating those channels and those central points of exchanges and two-way communication has got to be the key, man. It's got to be there. Team, I want to take a quick pause here to ask you for a huge favor that'll mean a lot to me. Please review and share the show. Share it with your team, your friends, your peers. Not only will it help them stop the guesswork in pricing, but it'll also help you and increase the chances that you'll take action and change for yourself. All right, much love. Now back to the show. Let's move us from the rewind, because I think that's a big lesson. Let's move to the play of what's going on today. Because you said you've been at Docker now for a little over 2 years?
2 years, yeah, almost two and a half, right?
And I'm guessing you made some changes, right, since you've been there. And I want you to think through all that. What's been a change that either you're most proud of or that's really resonated and helped out Docker?
I think the biggest change is what we just released just in the last few weeks, and that's completely changed how Docker is pricing and packaging these new features and products that we offer. And so I alluded to this a little bit before, but initially we were trying to sell these new features, products as discrete net new things with their own pricing model and things like that. And so like if you buy the core Docker product, you're going to buy a seat, right? And that seat gets you access to the core Docker product. And so our second sort of new products that we tried to launch was also a seat-based product. And so we sold it as another, if you want access to this product, you already have a Docker seat. Well, you've got to pay a seat for the new product as well. And so we were slowly starting to end up with a world where, a customer of Docker was going to have multiple different seats and seat prices to get access to all the products that we were having. And so we quickly realized that, what if we just collapse all these new seat prices that we're trying to add on to the core seat price and just included everything as a single seat price? That gets you access to a limited access to all of the new products. And then there's a consumption layer that we add on top of that. So now when you buy a Docker seat, you get access to all the new cool stuff that we're building for developers. You don't have to buy the new seat price. And so you can immediately start experimenting with some of these new products in a limited way, of course. And if you hit these consumption limit thresholds and it's really providing value for you, that's when you can go and buy minutes or scans or whatever the unit of measure might be. But transitioning more from a company with several discrete products to truly a platform pricing and packaging, I think is going to be a really cool change and really going to help really going to help developers discover all this new stuff that Docker's doing. Docker's known for doing one thing really well. And now that we have this new pricing model, I think it's going to be easy for developers to find all these new things without that barrier that a new seat price was creating.
Yeah, that the collapsing and consumption, that type of idea makes a lot of sense in my mind. How did you guys think through, like, as you were talking to the base? Because I'm sure the thing about selling to like technical folks is that they have their opinions, right? And they sort of like buying in certain ways, and they can react really strongly to changes in the model. So, what did you hear from the customer and the audience out there about this collapsing down like the different seats and then adding this consumption layer?
I think they loved it. There was already a consumption layer, so that when at first, the new seat price also came with limited consumption and consumption on top of it. So we were already limiting consumption and selling consumption when we were charging for the new seats individually. So I mean, customers, when we ask them, hey, well, what do you think about no longer paying this seat fee, right? Is this extra seat fee? We might raise your current core Docker seat price by a couple of dollars, but it's still a lot better than paying a full price seat for this new product. I think it was a no-brainer for customers. We were really lucky that we were still early on in the process. Like, none of these new products had really achieved escape velocity in terms of ARR. So it wasn't too painful for us from like an ARR perspective to make that hit. It was still early enough that we could kind of absorb this loss and additional seat ARR and kind of get away with it. So we were lucky in that regard. But I mean, customers love the idea. I'll tell you what, it's also something else I learned. It's a lot easier for billing systems to implement this type of system than it is a system where there's multiple different seat prices, each with its own consumption limit and consumption metric. If you have just a single seat price and then consumption layers on top of it, that is a whole lot easier for systems and billing to handle than what we started off doing. And so that was a win for them as well.
Yeah, that's super important too, because if you think about, like, the quote was probably so much simpler too, right? At the end of the day, that one single seat, even though the price was higher. That's the key. I heard you say that a minute ago, right? So the price was higher, but you don't have to pay for all these different seats anymore. You can just pay with one. And that balance here, I'm sure there was some math behind the scenes to make sure that all worked out for you guys, right? But
Right.
I'm actually thinking that's a very interesting way that you laid it out, because your customers are telling you, I'm actually willing to pay you a little bit more for this one seat to get the simplicity and access, not to think about like 5 different seats, right? It also probably makes it easier to buy more, which I think is another big key in your success story, right? So did you see anything happen? Like, did upsell expansion start to go up, or did you see seats go down? Like, what did you see when you guys made that change?
It's still really early days. So we just launched this, this is kind of hot off the press. But so no big insights yet. But, I expect that, there's much fewer line items for a procurement team, for example, to go in and try to pick apart.
I love it. Yeah, I think the way you describe it, it does seem like a no-brainer for both sides, for the customer side and for the Docker side. So huge win under your cap, but I'm sure it was a team effort. Was there anybody on the team that actually said, actually, you know what, we should not do this. We should not collapse it. We should not go down this path because of any reasons? Did anybody push back?
There was some pushback. And the challenge was there was, product leads who were in charge of their own P&Ls and ARR for their own individual product areas. And so when you go to tell them, hey, you know what, like, customers aren't going to buy a new seat price for your product anymore. It's going to be part of the old seat price. That's a lot of internal expectations and level setting, and maybe like readjustment of targets and bonuses and things like that, like, need to happen to get away with something like that. But yeah, I mean, there was definitely some resistance internally. Mostly people just kind of trying to defend their targets and things like that. That was the main area of pushback, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's a really important call out though, because as companies grow, right, you start with a product and then you have like multiple products and you go from multi-product to platform. Like, it's a very natural sort of evolutionary arc, right? Then you start getting people in charge of these things, and then they begin, to try to, so they're moving fast and developing and expanding their own little mini kingdoms, if you will. This type of model sounds like people had to adjust to like, hey, it's not about my product anymore. It's about Docker, like all of us, the platform. And that is a shift in of itself in even your operating model in-house, right? You just said bonuses and structures and targets. So I think people tend to overlook that, right? They think about, oh, we'll change the pricing model this way, it makes sense. But there could be some implications that you might have to change the way you run the business if you want to achieve this model.
It never surprises me how sensitive. I mean, of course, people say pricing is so sensitive to touch, but I mean, there's truly nothing that's more sensitive that I can think of in a product, in a company than price. The ripple effects of making changes to pricing are just so widespread and so impactful, not just to customers but internally. It's really it truly is a huge undertaking to try to change things. It's a tough job.
It is, and it's more than just slapping a number on a pricing page on your website, right? There's a lot of things behind it, and just listening to you, I mean, this evolutionary shift again, because companies grow, they grow in complexity. I'm sure Docker was once a small little company, is now they're huge. But the point being is that sometimes, and one big warning that I've seen in a lot of companies is sometimes your pricing model may be um, externalizing your complexity. What I mean is like externalizing your org structure, externalizing your limitations in billing in your software. And so a lot of times that could spill into the pricing model and create something that's just really hard to sell, really hard to buy. And I think that as a company, you have to be able to watch how they're both interacting, how you operate and how you price.
Definitely. I think our old model was definitely kind of reflecting our work structure. So yeah, that's a great point.
I've seen it before. I know you've seen it a few times as well. If you had to give away just one big lesson in that, in your journey, even though your journey at Docker is still there, what would you give as the one big lesson you've learned in the 2.5 years so far?
Start early. I mean, if you're thinking about doing a pricing change, start planning now. Because like we were saying, there's so much complexity involved. It touches so many parts from the organization. It's not as easy as just slapping a number on a product. It's so if you think you might want to change pricing next year, you should be start right now.
There you go. I think that's a good one, right? If you think, I think a lot of
Honestly,
people,
you're probably late if you haven't started yet.
yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. I was just going to say that. If you're thinking about it, you're probably already too late, right? So that's a good one for a lot of people to remember because there is I think a tendency to push it off, right? Like, hey, we're winning some deals, right? We're moving, we got stuff going on. Let's just deal with it later. But I think there's also a big time element too that you lose out on, right? So people may be leaving money on the table, but what they don't realize is that these tables also disappear because of the compounding of recurring revenue and how that works. Is that changing pricing 6 months from now versus today, you're losing out on that time, right? And that compounding, even though you're able to make up later. I think there's a big lesson there. So thank you, man, for that one. So let's get on to the last section here, which is fast forward. And there's, you're already pushing Docker forward in their pricing strategy and their thinking and their model. It sounds like things are working. But if you look ahead another couple of years, maybe, right, and you see all this change with adoption and embracing more complex models like usage, or just how AI is now pushing things even further into, work delivered activities and outcome based. Like, where do you see all this going for Docker or just from anybody in general? Like, you're probably seeing a lot of different models coming your way.
Yeah, AI. I mean, it sounds cliche to say it, but AI is certainly changing the game. And it starts with B2B software in general. Like, before we even think about pricing, like B2B is completely upended by AI, especially agentic AI. And so, the software, the B2B software of the last 10 years is going to be so different in the next 10 years. And it's a really exciting time to kind of be thinking about that. Because it does start to open up some really cool and interesting pricing models to kind of tie it back to pricing. I think you alluded to it for a second, but outcome-based pricing. So if you've got AI agents working for you and working on tasks and trying to actually do things for you with AI, agentic AI is definitely seems a lot closer than ever. So that's super exciting. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting time. It's a fun time. Pricing it's going to evolve along with AI, and it's just it's a great profession. It's a great profession to be in. It's super important to a company, and I'm just really excited about what the future holds.
Yeah, on our side as well. I mean, solving the problem is a huge undertaking in data, pattern recognition, aligning all these different vectors on strategy, your product, the customer, where you're going, all those key things. And AI can help and assist in a lot of that, right? I mean, there still has a way to go. I think they've made leaps and bounds over the last couple of years. And this agent-based pricing thing that you talked about, where you have now outcomes and like the old resolution that we're seeing from Zendesk and some of these other ones, right? I think it makes a lot of sense if you can align the outcome, and it's easy to attribute that outcome to the AI. Say, hey, for each resolution of a case, for each I don't know, reservation booked for a restaurant, like you can make it very, very clear that if the AI did the job, you should get paid for that job, right? Just like people. But then you get into the ones where software is kind of assisting or helping something out. I'm thinking of accounting software was sending an invoice. Maybe AI does part of it, but the human does the other part. So then where does the attribution come in? Who gets the credit, right? That's been one of the biggest topics going on out there is how do you divvy it up so that way when you price, it still comes down to feeling fair. Don't you think, David?
Absolutely. The old adage that the pricing metric has to be tied to the value the product is delivering, and outcome based software. It's easier to kind of define that and attribute that to AI, but when it's a little murkier, it's a little bit different. One thing that I think about is showing ChatGPT in a pricing model. It's not outcome based pricing. It's input based pricing. So based on the input to the GPT algorithm. And maybe that's another way to think about some of this example that your AI is assisting and is providing some of the inputs and not necessarily the output itself. And so maybe trying to find some way to give some credit to the inputs could be interesting.
Yeah, that's it's interesting you bring up the inputs because there is a spectrum, right? You got inputs and then stuff happens and then outputs, right? And that's how most software tends to work. Think about like I don't know, like a designer tool for a UX person, like maybe like a Figma or Sketch or something like that, right? Where I'm in there and I'm designing something. Now I'm doing the work because I'm designing, but the software is helping me with their templates and their this and their that. Maybe if there's some AI in there that can give me some maybe some design treatment and change things around or help me pick the right template or get to a better flow or interaction, then it's helping me do my stuff faster. And maybe it's allowing me to grab these inputs, which I value because it allows me to do it faster or better or whatever I'm doing, right? So there could be something there with those. I've seen it in image recognition or image software. Maybe there's some enhancements to a recommended template or recommended flow. And that could be something that could help. And work done or work delivered, I think has been like the not so popular talked about cousin of outcome-based pricing, right? Because the work delivered helps get to the outcome, but it's not the outcome itself.
Right. Yeah, the work done. That's interesting. That's a good way to look at it like that.
I've been going back and forth with a ton of people. It's like dozens of experts I've been talking to see like, how are we getting our arms around this new paradigm, right, in pricing and packaging? And maybe it's just, again, pushing the limits of where we could go. Because we know when cloud came out and you have users and then, you get all this advancements in usage base, which is, I think, pretty still in its early evolutionary. And now you have AI, which can do stuff like real stuff end to end for you. Then now it's
what
like changing the game.
User-based pricing. I mean, is it dead? I don't know.
I don't know, man. I think it's going to take a long time for it to leave. It may just like slowly like dissipate, kind of like a melting ice cube. But I think it's going to to be around for a while. I think
everyone's so quick to declare that user-based pricing is dead, but it's going to stick around.
I don't know, man. I think you're right. I think it's a little bit of BS that
user-based pricing is dead. But,
it's provocative. Let's face it, right? But look, shit. It's people, right? And so at the end of the day, sometimes when it comes to software pricing and technology, you're kind of paying for two things, right? You're paying for activity and you're paying for access to something. And so sometimes it's just easier to do the license and move on. May not be optimal, but there could be some other things you're optimizing for. So I don't think user-based pricing is going anywhere. I just think people are going to get smarter about like, should we actually do this or should we switch to something else, right? Man, you got it, man. There's tons of knowledge in there, and I want to thank you for coming on today. I want to thank you for just being very raw and honest about your journey, what's worked, what's not worked, and giving your point of view, man. I think our SaaS community today got a ton out of it. You want to leave them with just one more big thing. If you were just sitting, on a stage on a panel, and they said, "Hey, leave us with one final thought," David, what would you say is one final thought for pricing and packaging?
Get started early and involve everyone. Involve everyone. It touches everybody. Pricing touches everybody. It's important to everybody. It impacts everybody in an organization. So really think about your stakeholders and who you have, that's helping you out with the project.
I love it. Start with the stakeholders. I think that's a big one, right? Because people tend to throw on their red cape and run at it by themselves. You know what I'm saying? But it can be met with a lot of resistance. I think you got to bring everybody together. Yeah, I'm with you, man.
That's so true.
Excellent, man. Well, I love having you on. I got one final question, my favorite question for you, David. Are you ready? I'm going to toss it over. I got to ask you this, man. I ask everybody, what was your favorite jam or favorite song growing up?
I thought about this for you. You kind of mentioned this before the call, and I have to go with just the first song that popped into my mind. I have to be true to myself, no matter how embarrassing it might sound. But I grew up in South Carolina, and when I was growing up, there was a band that was getting started in Columbia called Hootie and the Blowfish, and we, they were getting big right as I was coming of age and buying CDs. And of course, their big album, Cracked Rear View, came out. I forget the year, but I was in 6th grade. And for my birthday, all I wanted to do was go to the concert. And so Let Her Cry has been like one of my favorite songs for the longest time. And loving Hootie the way that I did used to be so unpopular. I feel like there was so much anti-Hootie backlash that happened there. After they got big, and people just loved to hate on them. But I stood by it, and I think I've been vindicated with Darius Rucker and his resurgence as a country artist. I feel like my Hootie love has been completely vindicated now. So yeah, Hootie and the Blowfish, Let Her Cry, man. That was a song for me.
I love that's a first. Big shout out to Hootie, right? And by the way, you can sit there and say, "I told you so." I told you they were cool, right? At the end of the day, but no, good, thoughtful lyrics, classic songs. You're in there, man. It does say a lot about you, though, about how true you are to yourself and in growing up. So that's amazing. So thank you for playing along, man. Did you have fun today?
That was great. Yeah, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Beautiful, beautiful. I'd love to have you back. Give us an update on how things are going with Docker, with Axia, with everything else. And keep it going there. So, team, I want you to take everything you learned today. That was David Caughman. Follow him on LinkedIn. A lot of great thoughts, insights. He touches a lot of different pricing models. He's applying it as well. So his lessons are going to be something that are going to help you. Take them on Monday, get 1% better, and improve your pricing and packaging. And remember, stop guessing and start growing. Until next time.
Thank you and much love for listening to the Street Pricing Podcast with Marcos Rivera. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and don't forget to like and subscribe. If you want to learn more about capturing value, pick up a copy of Street Pricing on Amazon. Until next time.